Her dog started barking at the storm dark before Frances Keene heard the horse, and when she threw open the cabin door at Willow Bend, a lathered gray was standing head down in the sleet, with a man slumped forward over its neck. One hand still knotted in the mane, as though he had ridden the last miles asleep or dead. Frances went out into the freezing rain in her stocking feet, without stopping for a shawl, and she got a hand on the man's shoulder and eased him sideways, and the sleet ran down his gray face, and the years fell away all at once, and left her standing there in the mud, with her heart stopped in her chest. It was Nat, Nathaniel Dorn, who had ridden away from Willow Bend 11 years ago to the war and never come back, who she had waited 2 full years for, and then made herself stop waiting, because a woman cannot keep a lamp burning forever, for a man the army has listed among the missing. Nat Dorn, older and harder, and burning up with fever, half fallen off a dying horse at her door in a winter storm, come home at last in the worst possible way. No, Frances said, to the storm, to the fever, to the grave she could feel standing at her shoulder. No, not now that you're here. You don't get to do that. She was a healer, the only one for 40 miles, since old Doc Pruitt had died, the woman folks came to with their fevers and their broken bones and their birthings, and her healer's hands took over where her stunned heart could not. She got him down off the horse, a dead weight of soldier and soaked wool, half carrying and half dragging him through the mud, and up over her own threshold, and she barred the door against the storm, and stripped the freezing sodden coat off him, and got him down by the fire. And then she saw why he was dying. It was his leg. An old wound gone wrong, a rifle ball he'd carried since some battle whose name she'd never know, worked deep and festered, the flesh around it swollen tight and hot, and streaked with the red lines that ran toward the heart, and told any healer that a man had days, maybe hours, before the poison in the blood took him for good. He had ridden home to die, she understood. Some animal instinct had turned his horse toward the one place on earth he'd been happy, and he'd held onto the mane and let the gray carry him to Willow Bend to lay his bones down where his heart had always been. You came back to die on my doorstep, Nat Dorn, Frances whispered, cutting the trouser leg away with her shears, her hands sure though her voice shook. Well, you always were a stubborn fool, and so am I, and I am the more stubborn of the two. You've come to the wrong door for dying. I don't allow it here. She did not sleep for 2 days. She lanced the wound and drew the poison, working by lamplight with the clean, sharp knife she kept boiled, holding steady through the black rush of it while the fevered man thrashed and cried out names, some of them soldiers, one of them, once, low and broken, her own. She packed it with the poultices her grandmother had taught her, bread and charcoal and the bitter mold she grew on purpose in the cellar dark, because she had learned it fought the rot when nothing else would. She spooned willow bark tea between his cracked lips, for the fever and water, when he could take nothing else, a drop at a time, all through the night. She banked the fire high, and stripped him, and sponged him with cool water when the fever climbed toward the killing heat, and wrapped him warm when the chills shook the bed, back and forth, hour on hour, reading his body, the way she'd read weather and wounds her whole life. And she talked to him. All through the black hours she talked, low and steady, because she had read that a man far gone will follow a voice he loves back from the edge when he'll follow nothing else. She told him about the 11 years, about waiting, about the letter that never came, and the name in the newspaper's list of the missing, and the day she had finally taken his mother's silver ring off her finger and put it in a box, because a woman has to live. About how she'd never married, though 2 good men had asked, because her heart had gone to the war with a gray-eyed boy and never entirely come home. She told him she was angry at him. She told him she forgave him. She told him, somewhere in the deepest hour of the second night, when his breath had gone shallow and the red lines had crept past his knee and she thought she was losing him, that she loved him still, that she had never once stopped, and that he was not permitted to make her bury him twice. It broke the way a storm breaks, all at once, a great drenching sweat that soaked the sheets through, and then his breathing eased and went deep and even, and when Frances laid her palm on his brow it was cool, cool and living, and she put her face down on the mattress beside his still hand and wept, silently, from the very bottom of 11 years. He woke that afternoon. She was spooning broth, and he came back from wherever he had been, his gray eyes drifting open, and they found her face, and for a long moment he only looked at her, the way a man looks at something he had made up his mind he would never see again. "Franny," he said. His voice was a ruin. "I dreamed you. All the way home, I dreamed your voice." "You didn't dream it." She set the bowl down with hands not quite steady. "You rode a dying horse 40 miles through a blizzard to my door, Nat Dorn, with poison in your blood and no more sense than God gave a fence post, and you have been 3 days dying in my bed, and I would not let you. So no, you didn't dream me. Drink this." He drank, watching her over the spoon. "They told me you'd have married," he said, when he could. "That's why I never wrote. After the prison camp, after it all. I couldn't come dragging a broke soldier's carcass home to be some other man's wife's old sorrow. I only turned the horse this way at the end, because I hadn't the strength to point it anywhere else. I never meant for you to see me like this. I never meant to be your trouble again." "Well, you're my trouble again," Frances said, and her voice cracked straight down the middle. "You great stubborn fool. 11 years, and you'd have died 40 miles away sooner than knock on my door with your hat in your hand, because you decided all on your own what I'd want, without the courtesy of asking me." She was crying now, and not hiding it. "I never married Nat, not once. Ask anybody in Willow Bend why the healer woman turned down 2 proposals and kept an old silver ring in a box. I know why. I've always known why. I just never thought I'd get to tell you." His hand, so weak he could barely lift it, closed over hers. "Tell me," he whispered. "Because it was already spoken for," she said. "It's been spoken for since I was 19 years old, and you kissed me down by the willows and rode off to the war. There was never anybody else in it. There was never going to be." For 2 days, she let herself believe the worst was behind them. He took broth and then soft bread. A little color came back into his gray face. He could prop himself up and tease her, weakly, about the bitterness of her willow tea, and the sound of his dry humor in the cabin undid her every time she heard it. She slept, finally, a few hours at a stretch, in the chair by his bed with her hand near his. Then, on the 5th night, the poison came back. She woke knowing something was wrong before she knew what. The healer's instinct that had never failed her. And when she got the lamp lit and turned back the blanket, the leg had swelled again. Worse. The red streaks climbing past the knee toward the hip, faster this time, and his skin was scorching under her palm, and his breath had gone quick and shallow. The lanced wound had sealed over on top and festered underneath. A pocket of corruption walled up in the flesh, and she knew with cold certainty that if she did not open it again and clean it to the bone that same hour, no poultice and no prayer would keep the poison from his heart by morning. There was no doctor within 40 miles of sleet-locked road. There was only Frances Keene and her boiled knife and her grandmother's hard learning, and her own 2 hands. Nat swam up out of the fever enough to see her face and read it. "Let it be, Franny," he rasped. "You'll not save it twice. I made my peace with dying a long way back. Don't carve yourself up trying. I can't watch you break your heart on a dead man." "Then close your eyes," Frances said, and there was iron in it now. The voice that had faced down a breach, birth in a blizzard, and a man's crushed hand, and had never once flinched where flinching would cost a life. "Because I am not making peace with anything tonight. I made peace with your dying once, 11 years ago, and it was the worst thing I ever did to myself, and I will not do it again. Bite down on this." She folded a strip of leather and put it between his teeth. She heated the knife in the lamp flame until it glowed, and she set her jaw and she opened the wound again. It was the hardest hour of her life. She worked by lamplight with the storm howling at the shutters, cutting into the sealed pocket, draining it clean, packing it deep with the mold and the charcoal and the boiled cloth. Her arms slick to the elbow, and her whole body one long tremor she would not let reach her hands. Nat groaned around the leather and gripped the bed frame until it creaked, and once he went limp, and she thought she'd lost him, and put her ear to his chest, and heard the heart still going, and kept working. Toward the small hours she seared the deepest of it, closed with the flat of the hot knife, because there was nothing else that would hold, and the smell and the sound were things she would carry the rest of her days, and she did it anyway, steady, because love that will not do the hard thing is not worth the name. When it was done, she bound the leg and dosed him deep with the willow and the little laudanum she hoarded, and she sat back on her heels on the plank floor, shaking finally now that it was safe to shake, and she waited to see whether she had saved him or only tortured a dying man for nothing. The dawn told her. His fever, near daybreak, broke a second time, for good, this time the poison drawn clean and beaten, and when the pale light came through the shutters and found Frances still on the floor by the bed, Nat Dorn's eyes opened clear and knowing and fixed on her, and he took the leather from his own mouth with a trembling hand and said, "I have known brave men. I soldiered with brave men for 4 years." He had to stop for breath. "I never in my life knew one as brave as you, Franny Keene. You reached into the grave with your bare hands, and you pulled me back out of it. Twice." His voice failed. "I'll spend whatever you bought me tonight, proving I was worth the trouble." He healed slow. The leg would always be stiff and he would always walk with a hitch, and there were nights the war came back on him in his sleep, and she held him through them the way she'd held him through the fever. Word of it went around Willow Bend within the week, that the healer woman's long-lost soldier had ridden home half dead, and that she had cut the poison out of him with her own hand on the worst night of the winter. And folks who had once gently pitied Frances Keene for the ring she kept in a box came now to leave a jar of preserves or a laying hen on her step, shy and glad, the way a whole small place is quietly glad when a long grief finally turns to joy. She took their kindness with a nod and hurried back inside, because there was only one person's face she wanted to be looking at, and he was mending in her bed. But he healed. Through that long mending winter, the cabin at Willow Bend filled up with something it had been missing for 11 years. His low voice, the smell of his pipe, the sound of 2 people at a table instead of 1, and the girl who had waited and the boy who had gone away found, to their slow wonder, that the grown man and woman they'd each become fit together better than the children ever had, that all those hard years had not wasted the thing between them, but only tempered it, the way a blade is tempered, into something that would not break. When the willows greened out along the bend in the spring, Nat Dorn walked out to them on his stiff leg, leaning on the cane he'd whittled through his mending, and Frances walked beside him with her hand at his elbow, the way she'd walked beside him from the edge of the grave. He stopped at the very tree where he'd kissed her goodbye a lifetime ago, and he took from his pocket the silver ring. She had wondered where it had got to. He had found the box and said nothing, and he turned it in his fingers. "I put this on your hand once in my heart, and never got to do it true," he said. "I've got no fortune, Franny. A bad leg and a good horse, and a soldier's back pay, and a face 11 years too old. But I've got the rest of my life, and there is not 1 hour of it I want to spend anywhere but where you are. You saved a man who came here to die. Marry the man you made live." His weathered face was open as a boy's. "Say you'll have me. Say I'm home for good." Frances Keene, who had refused to let the grave have him twice, took her own hand out from the crook of his arm and held it out, steady now, wholly steady, for him to put the ring on at last. "You've been home," she said, "since the night that gray horse turned up my lane." "Yes, Nat, yes. Now and for good and for the rest of it." And under the greening willows, in the same spot where they had said goodbye when the world was young, the first love that 11 years and a war and a fever could not kill was made whole at last, and the healer's hands, that had pulled him back from death, closed around his for keeps, and neither of them, ever again, let go.